You've been feeling it, haven't you? That strange internal earthquake that started weeks or maybe months ago. Something fundamental is shifting inside you, and it doesn't feel like the gentle spiritual awakening the books promised. It feels like death. Not the death of your body, but the death of who you thought you were. Carl Jung spent decades studying this exact phenomenon, and what he discovered will either terrify you or liberate you completely. Because what you're experiencing right now, this uncomfortable metamorphosis that has you watching videos at 3 in the morning, trying to understand what's happening to your psychology, this isn't a breakdown. Jung called it the emergence of the true self. And for empaths specifically, this transformation doesn't make you softer or more open or more loving. It makes you dangerous. If this video found you, it found you for a reason. Jung understood synchronicity as meaningful coincidence. Those moments when the external world mirrors something profound happening in your internal landscape. You didn't randomly click on this. Some part of you, the part that's been cataloging everything, recording every betrayal with surgical precision, the part that's been waiting in the shadows of your consciousness, that part summoned this information to you. Because you're ready now. Ready to understand what you've actually been through. Ready to see that every moment of suffering was preparation for what comes next. Let's talk about who you used to be, the old empath identity. The version of you that society desperately needs to keep alive, but that's currently dying inside you like a snake shedding skin that no longer fits. From the moment you showed sensitivity as a child, you were trained, conditioned, programmed to function as an emotional shock absorber for everyone around you. Your family system needed someone to carry the dysfunction, so you became that someone. Your mother's unexpressed rage became your anxiety. Your father's shame became your self-doubt. Your siblings' jealousy became your guilt. You absorbed it all without question because that's what good empaths do, right? That's what sensitive souls are for. They praised you for it, called you mature beyond your years, said you were their rock, their safe place, the one person who really understood them. And you wore that identity like a badge of honor, not realizing it was actually a target on your back. Every narcissist, every energy vampire, every emotionally stunted person in a 50-mile radius could sense it on you. The empath, the one who feels everything, the one who will carry our pain so we don't have to look at it ourselves. You became a professional emotional garbage can. And the sickest part, you thought this was your purpose. You thought your sensitivity was meant to be used this way, as a service to others, as a gift you were supposed to give freely without boundaries or reciprocity or even basic acknowledgement. Your partner's infidelity somehow became about your inadequacy. Your friend's betrayal became about what you must have done wrong. Your parents' dysfunction became your responsibility to fix, to understand, to excuse, to carry until your spine bent under the weight of problems that were never yours to solve. Jung discovered something crucial in his clinical work. Empaths don't just absorb pain randomly. They're specifically selected by toxic systems to play this role. Families organize themselves around the empath like a solar system around the sun. Everyone else gets to orbit in their dysfunction while you remain fixed in place, providing gravitational stability, absorbing the chaos so the system doesn't collapse. And if you ever tried to move, to set a boundary, to say no, the entire system would panic and pull you back into position. They'd call you selfish, say you'd changed, accuse you of abandoning them in their time of need. But here's what they never told you. Here's what Jung discovered that changes everything. While you were busy absorbing everyone's pain, something else was happening simultaneously. You were recording it. Every manipulation, every lie, every emotional attack, every moment of betrayal. Your consciousness was cataloging it all with photographic precision. You know their triggers. You understand their insecurities. You can predict their patterns before they can. You've been studying your abusers like a scientist studies specimens, except you didn't realize you were doing it. You thought you were just being understanding, empathetic, compassionate. You weren't. You were gathering intelligence. And now, right now, in this moment of transformation you're experiencing, all of that intelligence is becoming available to you in a completely different way. This is what Jung meant by shadow integration. The empath who heals doesn't become more open. They become impenetrable. They don't feel less. They feel everything with even more clarity, but they stop letting it destroy them. They stop absorbing. They stop carrying. They stop bending. The symptoms you've been experiencing, let's name them accurately because recognition is the first step toward integration. You're exhausted in a way that sleep doesn't fix. You've been tired for years, maybe decades, but you disguised it as sensitivity. You told yourself that feeling deeply just requires more energy. But Jung understood this exhaustion differently. It's not sensitivity. It's the accumulated weight of carrying emotional burdens that were never yours. Your body is finally refusing to do it anymore. You're experiencing a sudden, almost violent intolerance for patterns that used to be normal. Conversations that used to seem fine now feel suffocating. People you used to accommodate now trigger something primal in you, a voice that says no with such force it scares you. You can't sit through the family dinner anymore. You can't pretend your friend's victim story is compelling. You can't nod sympathetically while your partner blames everyone else for their problems. Something in you has shifted, and it feels like you're becoming cold, harsh, judgmental. You're not. You're becoming conscious. The people around you are noticing. The ones who called you their rock are now calling you distant. Family members who praised your understanding are now saying you've become judgmental. Friends who relied on your emotional labor are now accusing you of changing, of not being yourself anymore. And they're right. You're not yourself anymore. The self they're referring to, that accommodating empath who absorbed everything, that version is dying. And they can feel it. They can sense that their emotional garbage can is no longer accepting deposits. This is the final test Jung wrote about. It doesn't feel like a test. It feels like everything falling apart simultaneously. You might be experiencing sudden isolation. People you thought were permanent fixtures in your life are disappearing. Jobs that used to provide meaning now feel hollow. Achievements that used to matter now seem irrelevant. The entire structure of your identity is being demolished, and you're standing in the rubble wondering what happened. What happened is this. You passed through. You survived something that destroys most people. And now you're being rebuilt from the foundation up, not as the empath who serves the collective's need for an emotional shock absorber, but as something Jung called the integrated self. The person who feels everything but is controlled by nothing. The person who understands everyone but can no longer be manipulated by anyone. This is your initiation, and your comeback is about to be legendary. You've been carrying something most people never develop. Jung called it the catalogued unconscious. Every moment you absorbed someone else's rage, every time you swallowed your truth to keep the peace, every betrayal you witnessed while pretending not to notice, your psyche was recording. Not forgetting. Recording. With photographic precision. You know their patterns better than they know themselves. You understand their triggers, their insecurities, their manipulations so completely that it sometimes frightens you. And here's what Jung discovered that changes everything. This wasn't weakness. This was preparation. The old empath absorbed without boundaries because they hadn't yet integrated what Jung called the shadow. The shadow isn't evil. It's everything you were taught to reject about yourself. Your anger, your selfishness, your capacity for cold calculation, your ability to say no without explanation, your willingness to let people suffer the consequences of their own choices. Society needed you to keep that shadow buried, because an empath who integrates their shadow becomes ungovernable. Jung spent years studying this transformation in his clinical practice. He watched empaths arrive broken, depleted, convinced something was wrong with their sensitivity. Then he watched them pass through what he called the encounter with the shadow, and what emerged on the other side terrified the people around them. Because the healed empath doesn't become gentler, they become precise, surgical. They retain every ounce of their perceptive ability, but lose completely their willingness to be destroyed by it. Let me tell you what this looks like in practice. The old empath felt their mother's anxiety and made it their responsibility to fix. The integrated empath feels their mother's anxiety, understands exactly where it comes from, and consciously chooses not to absorb it. The old empath absorbed their partner's rage and turned it into self-blame. The integrated empath recognizes their partner's rage as a manipulation tactic and removes themselves without guilt. The old empath carried their family's dysfunction as proof of their own inadequacy. The integrated empath sees their family's dysfunction clearly and builds their life somewhere else entirely. This is what Jung meant by the fortress. You don't feel less. You feel everything with even greater clarity. But you've developed what he called the discriminating function, the ability to experience an emotion without letting it colonize your nervous system, to understand someone's pain without making it your burden, to witness someone's chaos without diving in to fix it. And here's where it gets dangerous for the people who relied on the old you. You now possess something they can never defend against. Complete understanding without emotional investment. You know exactly how they operate. You've cataloged their patterns for years. You understand their psychological machinery better than any therapist they'll ever pay. But you're no longer willing to let that knowledge destroy you. Instead, you can choose. Choose when to engage and when to withdraw. Choose when to speak truth and when to let them drown in their own illusions. Choose who deserves your energy and who gets nothing but your absence. Jung called this weaponized empathy, and it sounds harsh until you understand what it actually means. It means you finally have agency over your own gift. The sensitivity that once made you vulnerable now makes you unstoppable because you've paired it with boundaries, discernment, and the willingness to let people experience the natural consequences of treating you poorly. Stop watching. Go to the comments and write, "I see my shadow." Do it now. The reason people are uncomfortable around the new you has nothing to do with you becoming cold or judgmental. It has everything to do with them losing access. Access to your emotional labor, access to your endless understanding, access to your willingness to absorb their dysfunction so they never have to face it themselves. Jung observed this pattern repeatedly. The moment an empath integrates their shadow and establishes boundaries, the people who benefited from their lack of boundaries begin a campaign of guilt and gaslighting. Your mother, who praised you for being so understanding, now claims you've become selfish. Your partner, who relied on you to manage their emotions, now says you've changed for the worse. Your friends, who dumped their problems on you without reciprocation, now say you're not the person they used to know. And they're right. You're not. You've passed through the fire, and you've emerged as someone who values their own peace more than other people's comfort. This makes you dangerous to every system built on your self-sacrifice. Jung documented what he called the collective resistance to individuation. When one person in a family system or social group begins to individuate, to become fully themselves, the entire system mobilizes to pull them back. Not because the system is evil, but because the system is invested in homeostasis. Your transformation destabilizes everyone who built their equilibrium on your imbalance. Your mother's emotional regulation depended on you absorbing her anxiety. Your partner's avoidance of accountability depended on you taking the blame. Your family's illusion of functionality depended on you carrying the dysfunction they refused to acknowledge. When you stop playing that role, the entire structure threatens to collapse. And rather than do their own psychological work, they'll try to convince you that you're the problem, that you've become cold, harsh, different. They'll weaponize your empathy against you one final time by suggesting that a truly empathetic person would go back to destroying themselves for everyone else's benefit. But here's what Jung discovered that changes the entire game. This resistance isn't evidence that you're wrong. It's confirmation that you're right. The intensity of their reaction is directly proportional to how much they relied on your lack of boundaries. The people who celebrate your transformation are the people who never exploited it. The people who attack your transformation are the people who built their entire relationship with you on exploitation. You're not becoming cold, you're becoming conscious. And consciousness, Jung warned, is the most threatening force in any unconscious system. An unconscious family cannot tolerate a conscious member. An unconscious relationship cannot survive a conscious partner. An unconscious social structure cannot accommodate a conscious participant. Your very presence now exposes the games, the manipulations, the unspoken contracts that kept everyone comfortable at your expense. This is why Jung called the integrated empath an architect. You're no longer building your life around other people's needs. You're architecting your existence according to your own values, your own truth, your own carefully considered decisions about who deserves access to your inner world. And that architectural precision, that conscious construction of boundaries and standards, that willingness to let your old life collapse so your true life can emerge, this is what makes your comeback inevitable. Because here's what happens when an empath finally integrates their power. They stop seeking validation from the people who never valued them. They stop explaining themselves to people who are determined to misunderstand them. They stop trying to prove their worth to systems designed to extract their energy. Instead, they become what Jung called self-authorizing. They grant themselves permission to exist on their own terms. They trust their own perceptions. They honor their own needs. They build their lives around their own peace rather than everyone else's comfort. And this self-authorization creates something Jung observed but struggled to name: a magnetic quality that attracts entirely different people into your orbit. Not the takers, the users, the energy vampires who sniffed out your lack of boundaries like sharks smelling blood and water, but the builders, the conscious ones, the people doing their own psychological work who recognize in you someone who's passed through the fire and emerged transformed. Your old relationships were built on your wounds. Your new relationships will be built on your wholeness. Your old career might have exploited your inability to say no. Your new path will honor your ability to choose. Your old family role required your self-abandonment. Your new identity demands your self-loyalty. This is the architecture Jung spoke about, the conscious construction of a life that reflects your integrated self rather than your fractured past. And here's the prophecy Jung documented that you need to understand. This transformation you're experiencing isn't just personal, it's collective. You're part of a larger pattern, a shift happening across the entire field of human consciousness. The era of the self-sacrificing empath is dying. The era of the integrated architect is being born. And you're not just experiencing this shift, you're embodying it. You're the template, the evidence that this transformation is possible. Every boundary you set gives permission to another empath to stop absorbing. Every time you choose your peace over someone else's comfort, you weaken the collective belief that empaths must destroy themselves to be valuable. Every moment you stand firm in your new identity, despite the backlash, you're literally changing the morphic field, the collective unconscious pattern that told empaths their only value was their willingness to suffer. Jung believed that individual transformation could shift collective consciousness, that one person doing deep psychological work creates ripples that affect the entire species. Your comeback isn't just about you rebuilding your life. It's about you demonstrating to every other empath still trapped in the sponge era that another way exists. That you can feel everything and be controlled by nothing. That you can understand everyone and be manipulated by no one. That you can be sensitive and powerful, empathetic and boundaried, open-hearted and strategically selective about who gets access to that heart. This is your initiation completing itself. The suffering wasn't random. The isolation wasn't punishment. The collapse of your old identity wasn't failure. It was all preparation for this moment. The moment you step fully into your power as an integrated empath, as an architect of your own existence, as someone who passed through the final test and emerged with the secret. You are no longer who you were. And the biggest comeback of your life isn't about returning to your old life with better boundaries. It's about building an entirely new life that your old self couldn't even imagine. The fortress has been built. The architect has awakened, and your era has begun.